Before learning this method, I strongly recommend that you learn how to solve the clock with the regular flip method, in case you don't know how to solve it already. This tutorial is more aimed at people who don't have much experience with advanced clock methods, but I have put timestamps in the description if you want to skip to another part. The full name of this method is 7 simul flip Tommy v2, and I'll just briefly explain what each part of the name means. The 7 simul part is short for the 7 simultaneous moves we'll be using to solve the puzzle, where a simultaneous move is 2 moves that can be done at the same time. This can happen when you have some pins down and some pins up, allowing you to do a move on the front and a move on the back together at the same time. These 7 simultaneous moves will consist of some pre-memorized ones that will be figured out during inspection, and some intuitive moves that will be figured out during the solve. As you may have guessed, the flip part refers to the flip that we'll be doing in the middle of the solve. This distinguishes it from the original method where you also do 7 simultaneous moves, but you don't flip the clock at all. So that one is just called 7 simul. One of the main developers of the original 7 simul without flip method is Tommy Cherry, where a specific version of 7 simul is named after him, simply called Tommy 7 simul. Fenger and Kelvin Liu was the first person to adapt Tommy 7 simul to include a flip in the method, and then Eddie Arzer later revised it, hence why this is version 2, and will be the method taught here. Alright, before I get into the method, I'm just going to explain a few things first. Now, like I mentioned, we are going to be figuring out some of the moves during inspection. Ultimately, we will be memorizing 5 numbers. These numbers will tell us how many hours or ticks to move these clocks. That can be 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on, all the way up to 6. And also, it can be a -1, -2, -3, and so on. Now, if you want to, you can memorize just the numbers, like 0, 2, 4, -1, -5, just like that. However, for some people, saying the word negative over and over again can make it hard to memorize these moves. So instead, a lot of people use some other techniques to memorize these numbers instead. I believe the most popular technique is to convert all these numbers into letters. So the first letter of the alphabet is A, so a 1 would be A, and then a 2 would be B, 3 C, 4 D, 5 E, 6 F. And then once you get to 7, which is the same as a -5 on clock, that can be G, and then H, I, J, K, and then I believe a lot of people just memorize O for 0. And then what you can do with these letters is you can make words out of them, which makes it easier to memorize. So for example, if we have a 2 and a -5, well, a 2 would be B, and a -5, which is the same as 7 on clock, could be G. So we have BG, which you could memorize a bag for. Another popular one is for the positive numbers. You do 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on, just as normal. But for the negative numbers, you use a letter. So A for -1, B for -2, -3, and so on. The last one that I'll mention, and I also use this one myself, is for positive numbers, you just memorize as normal. But for negative numbers, you translate it into a different language. So for example, Japanese. So this -1 would be ichi, which I actually shorten into just ich, and then ni for 2, -2, san for -3, and then yon, and then go for -5. It's really important that you find a method that works for you, because one singular method is not going to work for every single person. However, what I'll be using in this tutorial is the first memorization method I mentioned, which is just to convert all the numbers into letters. So this is A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and so on. Also, something that's really important on the topic of memorization is relative position. If you look at these clocks right now, they look to be at the 4 o'clock position. However, you might notice the solved position, or this red mark, is actually at the bottom. So we would actually call this -2 because this clock is 2 hours behind the solved position. Lastly, here is some notation we'll be using. To label the clocks themselves, all you really need to know is that U means up, R means right, D means down, L means left, and C means center, and then you can pretty much figure all of this out. To distinguish the front from the back, the front clocks, or the side we will start memorization from, which will also be the side that we start the solve from, these will be denoted with uppercase letters. And this is really important. The other side, which we will always do an X2 rotation, which looks like this, to get to, we will use lowercase letters to denote them. And lastly, the pin positions. So this is UL, UR, DR, DL, that should be self-explanatory. And then these clocks are the U ones, and then the R ones, D ones, L ones. If you know how to scramble a clock, those should be self-explanatory. When we have 3 pins up like this, we look at the pin that is not up, in this case the UR pin, and we write it as lowercase. So this would be lowercase UR, this would be lowercase DL. And we also have the slash moves when 2 diagonal pins are up. This would be a front slash because it kind of looks like a front slash, and then this would be a backslash. Alright, with all that information out of the way, let's get into memorization. This is the scramble I will be using to show how it works. The 5 moves that we'll be memorizing I'll just call M1, M2, and so on up to M5. And I really recommend memorizing M1 as its own thing, and then M2 and M3 as a pair, and then M4 and M5 as another pair. And you'll see why later on. Alright, the first half of memorizing M1, what we will do is look at this DR clock and see what it needs to do to get to the R clock. So as you can see, this clock needs to travel 1, 2, 3, 4 hours forward to match the position of the R clock. So in the back of our mind, we will memorize 4. Then for the second half of M1, what we will do is flip the clock over, and then we will see what this U clock needs to do to get to this L clock. So as you can see, it needs to travel 1, 2, 3 hours backwards to get to the L clock. So we have our 2 numbers of 4 and -3. So what we do is add them together and we get 1. And 1 in our memorization system can be converted to A. So we memorize just A, and then we flip back, and now we will memorize M2. So for M2, it's very similar to M1. There's 2 halves. So what we do is we see what this R clock needs to do to get to this D clock. So as you can see, it takes 1, 2, 3, 4 hours forward again. So in the back of our mind, we memorize 4, and then we flip the clock over, and then we see what this L clock needs to do to get to this UL clock. So it needs to travel 1, 2 hours backwards, which means -2. So we have 4 from here and -2 here, so 4 plus -2 is 2, and 2 can be converted to B. Still being on this back side, we will now memorize M3, and all you need to do for M3 is see what this U clock needs to do to get to the C clock. So in this case, this U clock needs to go forward 1 hour to match the C clock, so we will memorize 1 or A. And remember, M2 and M3 are going to be memorized as a pair. So we have A for M1, and we have BA for M2 and M3. and BA, you could think of a bay. Alright, now for M4 and M5, these numbers are definitely the hardest to memorize, but I'll try to give as many tips as I can to help you memorize them. So for M4, we are still on this back side, and the first thing that we need to do is see what the U clock needs to do to get to the UR clock. So in this case, it needs to go backwards 1 hour, so we temporarily memorize -1. Now what we do with -1 is we apply that to the C clock. And what do I mean by that? Literally visualize where this clock would be after we applied a -1 move to this. In other words, this is a -1, so this clock would be here. So with the new position of the C clock, what we do is we see what the D clock needs to do to reach that new position. So as you can see, it requires going backwards 1 to 3 hours. So we temporarily memorize -3. Then we flip the clock back over to the front, and with our temporarily memorized -3, we apply that to the L clock. So 1, 2, 3. Then we see what the UL clock needs to do to get to that new position of the L clock. So as you can see, 1, 2, 3, 4 hours, so +4. And then we apply that to the R clock. 1, 2, 3, 4. And this final position of the R clock is what we will memorize. So as you can see, it is at 1 o'clock, so we memorize 1 or A. Here's another way to memorize that first part if you're still stuck. Imagine with this UL pin up, we matched this clock to this clock. So that's like this. Now this UL move also moves this C clock. So you match this to this, which will also move this. And then you see what the D clock needs to do to get to the C clock. So in this case, -3 hours. Don't actually do this move in memorization for obvious reasons. And with your -3 memorized, you can flip the clock back over and memorize how I taught previously. Alright, now for M5, we are still on this front side, and we are essentially going to be adding up 3 numbers for this part. So our first number, what we do is we see what this C clock needs to do to get to the U clock. So 1, 2, 3, +4 hours. And then we apply +4 to the D clock. So 1, 2, 3, 4. This is the first number we memorize. This D clock is now at 5 o'clock, so we memorize 5. Then we flip the clock over. Our second number will be what does the L clock need to do to get to the UL clock. So as you can see, it is a backwards 1, 2 or -2. So now we have 5 and -2. And then our last number is what does the R clock need to do to get to the DR clock. So in this case, it's 1, 2, 3, 4. So our third number is 4. And then we just add all of those numbers up. So 5 plus -2 is 3. And then 3 plus 4 is equal to 7. We can convert 7 into a letter straight away. The 7th letter of the alphabet is G. But just remember that a +7 is the same thing as -5. So for our full memorization, M1 is A, M2 is B, M3 is A, M4 is A, and M5 is G. Now, like I said earlier, you want to group M2 and 3 and M4 and 5, and with those letter groupings, you can make words out of them. But now what we're going to do is flip the clock back, and now we are going to start solving. Alright, before you start to solve, you want to put the UL pin up. So, our first simultaneous move, what we're going to do is with our left hand, we are going to match this C clock to this D clock, like this. And with our right hand, we are going to perform M1. So M1 is A or +1. So just a 1 like that. Next, we are going to go in the pin position of L. So we'll have these 2 left pins up. And what we're going to do is we're going to intuitively make a 2x2 block on the bottom right here. So what we can do is with our left hand, we can match these edges up to match this edge. And then with our right hand, we can match this corner to everything else, like that. Next, we want to put this DR pin up. So we'll have everything up but the UR pin. And with our left hand, we are going to do M2. So M2 was B, or positive 2, so 1, 2. And with our right hand, we are going to do M3, so that was A, or positive 1. And this is why you want to memorize M2 and M3 as a pair, as you do them at basically the same time. Now what we're going to do is we're going to flip the clock over. And now this is really important. You should see this 2x2 block is solved right here. If this is not solved, then you should go back and see what you've done wrong, because you've either memorized something wrong or you've executed something wrong. So now what we do is we put this UL pin up, so we are in the backslash pin position, and with our left hand we will execute M4, so that was an A or 1, and with our right hand we will execute M5. So in this case M5 was G, which is the 7th letter of the alphabet, and positive 7 is the same as negative 5, so 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now the rest of the solve is just intuitive. So what we'll do is we'll put this DR pin down so that just this UL pin is up. And with our left hand, we're going to match this 2x2 block with this edge. And with our right hand, we're going to match this corner with this edge. That creates a 2x3 block. Now we'll put this DL pin up, so both of our L pins are up. And with our left hand, we'll match this 2x3 to this edge, like this. And with our right hand, we'll match this corner to this edge, like this. And lastly, we'll put this DR pin up, so every pin is up apart from this UR pin. And with our left hand, we'll take all of these 8 clocks and put them to 12 o'clock. And with our right hand, we'll do the same thing with this corner, put it to 12 o'clock, and we are solved. Alright, I'm going to do another example, but this time I'm going to start from this position. And I'm also going to go a little faster. So for M1, the first part is DR to R. So as you can see, plus 4 hours. And then the second part is this U to L. So 6 hours. So 4 plus 6 is equal to 10. So J is the 10th letter of the alphabet. But 10 is also the same thing as minus 2, so just remember that. Alright, so now for M2, we flip over the clock, and then we do R to D. So this R clock needs to go forward 1 hour, and then we flip over, then we do U to UL. So in this case, forward 5 hours. So 1 plus 5 is 6, and the 6th letter of the alphabet is F. So for M3, it is just U to C, and U needs to move forward 3 hours, so we memorize positive 3 or C. So we have F for M2 and C for M3, so you could memorize a face. So now for M4, we see what U needs to do to get to UR, so that is a 6, and then we apply that to the C clock, so as you can see it will be in this 2 o'clock position now, and then we see what the D clock needs to do to get to that new position, so it needs to go backwards 2 hours, so minus 2, we flip over the clock, we apply minus 2 to the L clock, so now it is in this position. We see what the UL clock needs to do to get to that new position, so that is plus 1, 2, and then with our plus 2, we apply that to the R clock, and then we memorize its final position, so 1, 2. Now this is where relative position is important. As you can see, it is behind this marker by 5 hours, so it is minus 5, and then we can also memorize 7, or G, which is the 7th letter of the alphabet for M4. So now for M5, we do C to U. So C needs to go forward 4 hours, and then we apply 4 to the D clock. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And as you can see, this D clock is now at -2. So we remember -2 as our first number to add up. And then we flip the clock over. We see what this L clock needs to do to get to the UL clock. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So now we have 5. And at this point, you can also just add the two numbers up right away and then add this last number up at the end, which probably makes it easier for most people. So -2 plus 5 is equal to 3. And then we do R to DR. So R needs to travel -1, 2, 3, 4 hours to get to DR. So remember -4, and then we have our 3 from before, and our -4 here, so that creates -1. -1 is the same as 11, and the 11th letter of the alphabet is K. So for M4 and M5, we have G and K, which you can memorize as goalkeeper. So our memorization is J, face, goalkeeper. So now we go back to here, and we will put this UL pin up. And now with our left hand, we will solve this center clock to this down clock, like this. And then with our right hand, we will do M1. So M1 was J, which is the 10th letter of the alphabet, which is also -2. So 1, 2. Now we put this pin up, so both of our left pins are up. And now we will create this 2x2 block by matching these edges to this edge, and matching this corner to everything else. Then we'll put this pin up. And with our left hand, we will do M2, and our right hand will do M3. So M2 was F or 6, so like that. And then M3 was C from face, so that is +3. Alright, now we flip the clock over, and we have this block solved indeed. And we'll put this pin up, and with our left hand, we will do M4. So if you remember from goalkeeper, M4 was G, which is the 7th letter of the alphabet, which is the same as -5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then with our right hand, we will do M5. So K, which is the 11th letter of the alphabet, and 11 is the same as -1. So just that. All right, now the rest is intuitive. So we'll put this pin down, and with our left hand, we'll match this block to this edge, and with our right hand, we'll match this corner to everything else. And then we'll put this pin up. With our left hand, we'll match this block to this edge, and with our right hand, we'll match this corner to this edge. And then we will put this corner up, and then now we will just solve everything to 12 o'clock. So with our left hand, we'll take this big block and solve it to here. With our right hand, we'll take this corner and solve it to here. And everything is solved. If you have any questions about this method, feel free to ask about them in the comments, and I'll do my best to answer them. Also, if I get the time, I'll make a follow-up video to this on a bunch of random tips and tricks to help you get faster with this method. Alright, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.